Donald Trump just got the news he feared from China's President Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping just announced that when he visits the United States in September, he will be here only for 1 day. And Xi Jinping wants to send a message about the Thucydides Trap that he told Donald Trump before when Donald Trump visited Beijing. And that is that China sees itself as the ascendant superpower, sees the United States as the declining power, and that the United States needs to accept China's dominance. And part of that dominance is Xi Jinping showing up for just 1 day. Whereas in 2015, when Xi Jinping visited former President Obama in Washington, D.C., Xi Jinping visited from September 22nd to September 28th of 2015 with 4 full days in the United States, including stops in Seattle, Washington, D.C., and New York. Now, Xi Jinping will just be heading in and out, and he will be seeing Donald Trump for pretty much less than a day. And Xi Jinping, through all of the Chinese press, is saying they don't expect anything to come of this meeting, and that Xi Jinping's then going to leave right away. Let's talk about what's being reported here and in China right now. So Xi Jinping said he'll fly into the United States September 23rd. He'll hold 1 day, like a half a day of White House meetings, and then he's going to leave right away. He's not going to go to New York to meet the UN General Assembly. He sees no need to. He just wants to get in and out. The South China Morning Post is reporting from Chinese sources that China is rattled right now and angry that the Trump White House is in utter chaos weeks ahead of the Xi Jinping visit, and that Xi may cancel the visit if the United States continues to show that it can't coordinate and organize this trip at all. Here's how it's being reported by the South China Morning Post. With less than 6 weeks until Chinese President Xi Jinping's planned trip to Washington, his first state visit since 2015, Beijing finds itself increasingly unsettled by the chaos within the Trump regime. Sources told the South China Morning Post that Chinese officials were confronting a disorganized Trump administration that lacked, quote, planning, coordination, with little progress made on hammering out deliverables for the leaders' summit. Also, the South China Morning Post is reporting that they believe that Hegseth is, quote, on the verge of losing his job, which could raise future questions about U.S.-Chinese defense ties. Here's what they're saying. Speculation is growing in China that Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth is at an increasing risk of losing his job, raising questions about the possible implications for U.S.-China relations ahead of this half-a-day visit by Xi Jinping. Sources speaking on conditions of anonymity say that Hegseth is on the verge of losing his job, and they cite the ongoing deadlock in Iran, which they say is utterly humiliating for the United States. Also, it's being reported in China how, as a result of the lack of cooperation in areas of science and climate between the United States and China, China is increasingly seeing more cooperation with Singapore and South Korea, as the United States is no longer looked at as a place where cutting-edge scientific research is done. How deeply sad. Now, the same day that Xi Jinping announced this half-day trip in order to show that he doesn't really even care about showing up to the United States, compare that to Donald Trump's trip to Beijing. Here's what Xi Jinping announced in a major public address yesterday. China's development will bring about prosperity for all through the common progress of all its regions and the Chinese nation on the basis of completing the reunification of the motherland. That refers to China's policy of reintegrating Taiwan, sovereign country, into China as China sees Taiwan as part of China. Now, this comes at the same time that Donald Trump just removed the last U.S. aircraft carrier from the Pacific, essentially ceding dominance of Chinese naval forces in the region. This also comes at the same time, if you've been following the geopolitical developments, as the United States has moved its final aircraft carrier, the USS George Washington, now to the Middle East, because Trump's destroyed the U.S. logistics, and we can no longer feed our troops aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, who are living in horrid conditions there. So the George Washington will be replacing the Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier, which has been out for over 260 days. China and Russia collectively have been launching naval operations in and around Japan as well. And so as the U.S. has shown weakness in the area, we've seen Chinese and Russian joint drills right around Japan. And this is as Takaishi is an ally of Donald Trump, is basically, saying we need help, we need help. This is as Donald Trump has not provided the security umbrella promised to Taiwan. And at the same time, Donald Trump is attacking South Korea and praising Kim Jong-un. And then Xi Jinping recently praised his relationship with Kim Jong-un, as Donald Trump is trying to be like, oh, Kim Jong-un's my friend also. I like him better than South Korea. So the U.S. security umbrella in South Asia has been completely destroyed as well. Xi Jinping said the following yesterday also. The prospect for the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation are bright, and the dream generations of Chinese people have devoted themselves to is gradually becoming a reality. After enduring countless hardships, we have finally reached this magnificent moment. All great achievements in the world come through struggle. And again, these are major messages ahead of his trip, where he wants to intentionally show that he doesn't want to be with Donald Trump longer than half a day. He also says, Xi Jinping also says, China's development will bring prosperity for all through common progress of regions and Chinese nation. On the basis of completing the unification, we will bring prosperity to all. Transformation unseen in a century is accelerating across the world, Xi Jinping says. Hegemonism, unilateralism, and protectionism are getting more and more rampant. This is all messages directed at Donald Trump and Trump's destruction of U.S. alliances with the rest of the world. Xi Jinping goes on to say trade wars and tariff wars waged by some countries severely disrupt the world economy and undermine international trade rules. At this critical juncture, BRICS countries standing at the forefront of the global South should act on the BRICS spirit of openness, inclusiveness, and win-win cooperation, jointly defend multilateralism and the multilateral trading system, advance greater BRICS cooperation, and build a community with shared futures for humanity. Place development at the heart of our international agenda and ensure that global South countries participate in international cooperation as equals and share in the fruits of development. Now, whether you believe that or not, that is how Xi Jinping diplomatically is messaging this, whereas Donald Trump is saying to places like Oman, we're going to blow the shit out of you. Or Donald Trump saying, we want Canada to be the 51st state. Or Donald Trump posting AI memes of himself creepily leering over Greenland while Trump tries to send in U.S. companies to non-consensually mine and drill in Greenland, while Trump says that should be the 51st state. While Donald Trump says we're going to annex the Strait of Hormuz, while Donald Trump continues to behave like the lunatic that he is, attacking NATO and degrading NATO as an international force, the counter to NATO, if you will, is BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa are the initial BRICS nations, and then they've been joined by so many other nations. And what China has been trying to do, and now very successfully, is project BRICS as the viable, more stable, more predictable alternative to the US-led world order, which is defined now as chaos, unpredictability, and Donald Trump's destructive and corrosive behavior. This is what Xi Jinping's visit is all about. It is, as Newsweek says, for China to have Trump roll out the red carpet and for Trump to roll over. Remember, Trump's visit to Beijing was characterized by Donald Trump's obsequiousness. Donald Trump bowing to Xi, bowing to his more dominant Xi Jinping and Donald Trump listening as Xi Jinping talked about the Thucydides Trap and how weak the United States has become under Trump. And Trump's like, yes, we are weak. But it was not because of me. It was because of Sleepy Joe or whatever idiotic thing Donald Trump was saying. It was quite embarrassing to watch. The Atlantic reporting that lots of military officials have been warning, including Grinkowicz, the NATO commander of Europe from the United States, about how the U.S. and its allies could be at risk for a Russia-China multi-front attack. And so the Atlantic asked a range of military experts and strategists what the West would do in such a situation, and found the response rang surprisingly hollow. I mean, after all, the United States can't even take care of its own sailors and Marines aboard its aircraft carriers and its battleships as well. I mean, look, we've been talking a lot about the Abraham Lincoln and the horrible conditions aboard there, worse than the worst prisons. But, as Aaron Parnas, affiliated with the MeidasTouch network, also wrote, a U.S. Navy destroyer spent 4 days without working toilets, air conditioning, or galley services after losing power in the South China Sea. The USS Benfold suffered a generator failure on July 24th while accompanying the USS George Washington, and the service members had to defecate in buckets or on the floor. And we've seen, whether it was the USS Gerald Ford, we've seen what the toilets looked like in the Abraham Lincoln, but on the Gerald Ford, there was feces everywhere. And on this ship, there's not even places to go to the bathroom. It's all over the floor. These are disgusting conditions, as Pete Hegseth defames our service members and says the families who are telling these horrible stories about what are happening to our brave and courageous service members are lying. And The Guardian wrote this piece. Families of U.S. sailors denounced Trump and Hegseth for dismissing their experiences and calling them liars and defaming them. And, that was, with all that going on, this is, as, the U.S. is showing its weakness relative to China. We've reported on as well. The Telegraph broke the story, how Russia is building a secret drone base structures right at the border that could have the possibility of striking NATO, as, again, Russia and China and North Korea and Iran are moving deliberately together. They have a plan. While Donald Trump wakes up one day, we have a deal. We don't have a deal. I'm going to blow the shit out of Oman. I mean, it's, again, really embarrassing to watch. Let me remind you of the following. This was from April 15th. This is what aired on Fox. Before Donald Trump's visit to China, which would be about a month later, it had to be moved back. This is the ridiculous propaganda. This is from April 15th. This is how they were talking about the United States' relations with China and the war in Iran back on April 15th, months and months and months ago. Here, play this clip.
Iranians want round 2 of peace talks. And the Chinese are begging him to go back to Pakistan because now Beijing starting to feel the heat.
2 Chinese banks received letters from the U.S. Treasury. I'm not going to identify the banks, but we told them that if we can prove that there is Iranian money flowing through your accounts, then we are willing to put on secondary sanctions.
Xi Jinping got a bit prickly about the embargo. Now wants the whole war over. He sent a letter to Trump, a love letter.
He's somebody that needs oil. We don't. He's somebody I get along with very well. Just wrote me a beautiful letter.
He wrote you a letter?
Yeah, he did. He responded to a letter that I wrote because I had heard that China is giving weapons to, you're seeing it all over the place, to Iran, that China is
giving weapons. Did he say he's giving them?
Yeah, and I wrote him a letter asking him not to do that. And he wrote me a letter saying that essentially he's not doing that.
Trump says the Chinese are actually happy that we're opening up the strait, saying this, Xi will give me a big fat hug when I get there in a few weeks. Beijing can't buy any more cheap sanctioned Iranian oil, and now every Chinese trade route to the West is controlled by the U.S. Navy. But the Chi-Coms are welcome to buy American, and they already are. The U.S. oil market is open for business, and it is booming. Big oil just had its biggest payday in history. The United States just hit an all-time high all week exporting 5 million barrels a day. Over 100 tankers are lining up off the Gulf of America to get their frantic little hands on our sweet, sweet crude. And it's not just crude. We're shipping everything from gas, jet fuel, diesel at record levels. And we're getting over 1 million barrels a day from our new amigos in Venezuela. Oil futures for June just dropped into the 80s. Prices at the pump are down from last week's highs and still falling.
If you told me that we were going to be at only $92 a barrel, $92 a barrel, I would have been very surprised.
Now, one of the things that Xi Jinping is also, I think, going to be focused on when he visits the United States is the relationship with Canada. Recall, Canada, under attack by the United States trade war, the United States tariffs, Canada has now opened its economy to China in ways it never had before and never would consider before. You have a plan to bring in Chinese EV manufacturing into Canada. And as these tariffs by Donald Trump are an attempt to cripple the Canadian economy, if there's a path to work more robustly with China in a way that benefits Canadians, and this is a trust building exercise between Canada and China that they got to work out. There's been decades and decades of mistrust. So can they come together? But if this will help build factories in Canada, not hurt the existing auto industry in Canada, but who's hurting it more than the United States now? There's potential more cooperation between Canada and China right now. And I think that's what Xi Jinping is going to be focused on as well, back channeling with Carney. Remember what Carney said when he spoke at the Economic Club of New York about the Thucydides Trap with Xi Jinping? Remember the Thucydides Trap, just so you remember what that means. It goes back to Thucydides, who talked about how the rising power, Sparta and Athens, how the rising power inevitably fights with the declining power. And China was saying, we shouldn't fall into the Thucydides Trap. Let us dominate you, Donald, basically. This is what Carney had to say. Let's play it.
I raised with him the Thucydides Trap. Now, I raised it with him because I had been in a meeting with him with a handful of U.S. CEOs a few years previous, and President Xi had raised it in that context. And I quoted, in effect, back to him, the president, saying, I remember you said that. And what you said at the time was the way out of it is cooperation on issues of global public interest. So what are the issues of global public interest, leading them to where is that cooperation between the hegemons he's really talking about, but others supporting? And, for him, at least in the response then, which in fairness was more or less what he'd said 2 years previously, is around climate. Is around clean energy and climate, and we're establishing a leadership there, but everyone needs it, and how are we going to share this, and how are we going to finance it, et cetera. And his point there was exactly that: how do we restructure the institutions?
And I'll finally remind you that Prime Minister Sharif of Pakistan, who's been the main mediator between Iran and the United States, even though there's no productive mediations taking place, has praised Xi Jinping. This is what he said as well. And this is the sentiments about Xi throughout much of the world. This is what Prime Minister Sharif says. Under the most dynamic and visionary leadership of President Xi Jinping, China has lifted 800 million people out of poverty, provided jobs to millions of people. China, in terms of economic power, is second to none. China, in terms of military, is at par with the most powerful nation in the world. And don't sleep on the fact that the Mecca Pact between Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey is also signaling a move of opening a new security umbrella, Arab nation controlled, with the help of China as well. So these are a lot of the factors heading into Xi Jinping's visit. It is notable that he was there far longer with Obama than Trump. Tell me what you think. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 7 million subscribers. Pre-order WTF America, the book I wrote with my brothers. Comes out October 20th, but if you can pre-order it now, that would be great. Thanks, everybody. We appreciate you.
Breaking news right now. My brothers and I wrote a book. It's called WTF America. And well, doesn't that just say it all? It comes out officially this October, but you can pre-order your copy today. Just scan the QR code or click the link in the description below.